Story 2: The Elf Kingdom, London, England. Lucy and Jonathan were back at home after their recent adventure in Paris. They were at the bakery their parents owned, doing their chores and chatting about the fun they had in Paris. "I wonder if the magic tree will ever call us again for another adventure," said Lucy. "Probably not. We still have the backpack from our previous adventure," replied Jonathan. Lucy stopped what she was doing and looked at Jonathan in shock. "I completely forgot about that," she said. "We should have returned it as soon as we came back. The magic tree is probably wondering what happened to us." Lucy turned around, and Jonathan was nowhere to be seen. Looking at the ground that had just been swept, she noticed crumbs on the floor. She followed the crumbs to the back room, and there was Jonathan with a large piece of cake sitting smugly on a sack of flour. "Did you hear what I said?" exclaimed Lucy. "And you know you are not supposed to eat cake before dinner. Definitely not a piece of cake that is bigger than your head." Jonathan tried to distract Lucy. "Tell me more about what we do with the backpack the magic tree gave us. When do we return it?" he said, while quickly stuffing his face with chocolate cake. "Let's plan on going there first thing in the morning. It's a Saturday, so we don't have any chores," said Lucy. "Oh, and I have a new rule. If you are going to eat a chocolate cake before you are done with your chores, then you need to do my chores as well. Bye, I'll see you at home," she said as she ran out through the front door of the bakery. The next morning, Lucy and Jonathan got up early and headed out to the forest to return the backpack from their last adventure. As they approached, they heard the tree speaking to them. "Welcome back. I hope you had a good adventure in Paris." "Yes, we did. It was so much fun," said Lucy. "We're sorry we did not return the backpack earlier." "They have the best chocolate cake in Paris," added Jonathan. "The important thing is that you saved the mermaid. She is now back at home with her family," said the tree. "Are you ready for your next adventure, leaving now?" "Yes!" they shouted together. "Where are we going?" "You'll see," said the tree. As they had done before, they pulled the branch of the tree and went inside. There, Lucy and Jonathan found another backpack on the table. They picked it up and replaced it with the old pack from their previous adventure. They then closed their eyes, and when they opened it, they were under a tall tower. They heard a clock chime. It sounded like a grandfather clock, but much louder. They looked up and saw that the clock was a part of the big tower. "This looks so familiar. I know I read about this in class," said Lucy. "I know where we are," said Jonathan. "We are in London, England, and this is the Big Ben." "You're right. How did you know that?" said Lucy, impressed by her little brother's knowledge. "It says it right there on the sign behind you," replied Jonathan with a grin, pointing to the sign. "I guess that makes me a better adventurer than you." "Very funny," replied Lucy. "Now, let's open the backpack and see what adventure the magic tree has for us." They opened the backpack and found the note from the magic tree. inside it. It says we need to climb the stairs to the top of the tower and meet the Prince of Elves, who is waiting for us. We need to tell him the password, which is pointy ears. There is a guard at the bottom of the tower, but he will let us in once we tell him the magic tree has sent us. I've got so many questions. Let's hope the Prince of Elves can answer them. I wonder if he's a real prince. Jonathan wondered aloud. They followed the signs leading them to the entrance of the tower that contained the Big Ben. As they got to the door, they passed a sign giving them more information. It said the Big Ben is the name of the bell within the clock that is in the Elizabeth Tower. It is over 150 years old. I wonder who Elizabeth is and why they named the tower after her, asked Jonathan as they walked towards the entrance. I know the answer to that, said Lucy. She is the Queen of the United Kingdom, of which England is a part. She became queen the same year Grandma was born. Can you imagine that? Grandma told me that. She has been queen for a very long time. They reached the tower entrance and whispered to the guard that the magic tree had sent them. The guard let them in, but warned them it was a long way to the top. They had to climb 334 steps to get to the top. They decided to take it slow so as not to tire themselves out. Halfway up, Jonathan wanted to stop for a snack, but Lucy urged him on until they finally made it to the top. They pushed open the door at the top of the stairs and were amazed by what they saw. They were behind the clock, and to the side was a giant bell. This was the Big Ben that chimed every 15 minutes. A giant hammer would strike it, and that was the sound heard for miles around. As they were walking around, they saw a boy in the corner looking at them. Lucy yelled, "Pointy ears!" And the boy smiled and walked towards them. "You must be the adventurers, Lucy and Jonathan," he said. Lucy tried to hide her smile, quite proud of being called adventurers. Jonathan blurted out, "Yes, and we are the best adventurers here to save you." "How do you know our names?" asked Lucy. "The magic tree has told me all about the two of you. Come with me and I will tell you my story," said the prince. He took them inside a small room in the corner where he had been hiding. There, he offered them some fruits. Jonathan grabbed an apple and started eating as he was famished. "Are you really a prince?" asked Jonathan, his mouth full of apple. "Yes, I am. I am the prince of all forest elves that live in the forests outside London. But you can call me Sam," said the prince. "But you look like a regular boy. I thought elves have pointy ears," asked Jonathan. "All my subjects look like elves with pointy ears, but I don't, as I am the prince and my father is the king of all the elves in the forest," replied Sam. "Do you know Santa?" asked Jonathan. "I've heard of him, but don't know him. We are not like the elves of the North Pole. We are forest elves," said Sam. Lucy held her hand up. Enough with the questions, Jonathan. She turned to Sam. How can we help you? Sam took a deep breath and told his story. He lived in the forest with his father, mother, and brother. They lived a happy life. There was plenty of food in the forest, and they played with all the animals. No humans could see the elf kingdom as it was hidden within the trees. 3 days ago, they noticed that it was getting colder. This was strange because the elf kingdom's temperature was always warm and sunny and never changed, even in winter. For the last 3 days, every day the elf kingdom was getting colder. This was of concern because they had no winter clothes. Also, cold weather meant that the trees would not be able to give them food. No one could figure out what the matter was. Sam's father, the king, called a meeting of all the elves. They all gathered around and tried to come up with an explanation as to why it was getting colder. Finally, Willie, the wise elf, asked if anyone had checked on the magic stone. The magic stone was what gave the elves power not to be seen in the forest. It also controlled the temperature and kept it warm so that the trees could produce food. No one had checked on the magic stone because it was hidden under a tree. They rushed to the tree, and what they saw shocked them. There was a freshly dug hole and no magic stone to be found. This was a disaster. The very future of the elf kingdom could be threatened. Without the magic stone, they would not be able to hide in the forest and could be seen by humans. As they were pondering the question of who could have taken the magic stone, Lily, the little elf, spoke up. She said she had seen a family who lived in the neighboring village foraging for mushrooms. If anyone took the magic stone, it was probably them. What is foraging for mushrooms? Asked Jonathan, interrupting Sam's story. Sometimes families from the neighboring villages come to the forest to try and find mushrooms that they can then eat with their dinner, replied Sam. It's a fun family activity. They usually have a dog with them, so the dog might have dug up the magic stone. Sam continued with his story. On hearing that a neighboring family had the stone, he went to the closest village and started knocking on doors, asking if anyone had the stone. The stone was shaped like a triangle, so it was easy to describe. Sam got lucky. At the 5th house he visited, a little boy opened the door. He remembered finding the stone, but unfortunately he did not have it with him. His cousin was visiting from out of town and took it with him on a tour of London. And when he got back after the tour, he did not have the stone because he lost it. That is why I am here in London, said Sam. I am searching for the stone. It has to be in one of the places the cousin visited on his tour. Which sites did he visit? Asked Lucy. His tour started with a visit to Big Ben, which is why I started here. After this, he went to Buckingham Palace and then ended at Westminster Abbey. I won't be able to search the other places by myself, and that is why the magic tree sent the two of you, explained Sam. We better get moving. We have no time to waste, said Lucy. With every day that passes, the elf kingdom gets colder. Can we get something to eat before we start? Asked Jonathan. Lucy was about to say no when Sam chimed in. Yes, please, I'm starving. Lucy gave in. All right, we can get a quick lunch, she said. She opened the backpack, and as expected, there was a packet with money in it. This is the money they use in England. It is called the pound, and the coins are called pence. See the lady on the pound note? That is Queen Elizabeth, who this tower is named after. Is there a forest nearby where we can get lunch? Asked Sam. Oh, we're in the city now, so we can just go to a restaurant, replied Lucy. I've heard of those, but I've never been, said Sam in wonder. It will be such a treat to go and sit down and eat something I have never tried before. In the forest, we have to find food for ourselves. Have you ever had chocolate cake? Asked Sam. I've heard of it, but never tasted it, said Sam with a shake of his head. Oh boy, you're in for a treat, replied Jonathan, rubbing his hands together. And the best part is that Lucy cannot say no, since you want to try it so badly. But I don't want to try, started Sam, before he was interrupted by Jonathan. Na, let's get going. They headed down the Elizabeth Tower stairs, went outside, and started looking for a place to eat. They soon came across a cozy cafe that had a sign saying it served traditional English food. They went inside and were greeted by a cheery lady who seated them and gave them the menu. They looked through the menu and realized they needed some help in understanding what the dishes were. When the lady came back to take their order, Lucy asked, "What are bangers and mash?" The lady smiled and explained that it was a traditional English dish of sausages, mashed potatoes, peas, and gravy. "Sounds yummy," replied Lucy. "I'll have that." Both Sam and Jonathan opted for the fish and chips, one of the most famous dishes in England. While they were waiting for their meal, Lucy asked Sam about what else the magic tree had told him. "The magic tree told me that the two of you are the best adventurers he has ever seen. The tree is over 500 years old, so he has seen a lot of adventurers in his time." "Why did he select us?" asked Lucy. "There are plenty of other children in the village." "He said you two were trustworthy, reliable, hardworking, and curious," replied Sam. "He needed someone whom he could trust, who he could rely on to get the job done, who would work hard till it is complete, and had the curiosity to learn more and increase their knowledge." "I'm so glad to hear that," said Lucy, as she picked up and sniffed her dish that had just arrived. They had a wonderful meal, topped off by a chocolate cake and sticky toffee pudding for dessert. Then it was off on their adventure. They decided to start at Westminster Abbey as it was only a 5-minute walk. They walked away from the River Thames that ran through London and was soon at Westminster Abbey. Lucy bought 3 tickets and they entered. They were all stunned by how big the abbey was. Lucy pulled out the magic tree's note from her backpack. "It says here The abbey is over 1,000 years old, she exclaimed. This is where they had the coronations for the kings and queens of England. What's a coronation? Asked Jonathan. A coronation is the ceremony when someone becomes a king or queen. That is when the crown is placed on their head for the first time, replied Lucy. We are never going to find the stone in such a large place. Plus, we don't even know if it is here, said Sam, shaking his head in worry. Don't worry, replied Lucy. We need to be positive, and we will find the stone. They huddled together to plan their next moves. Westminster Abbey is too large for us to search every nook and corner, said Lucy. We need to think about where a boy would go if he came here on a sightseeing tour. She turned to Jonathan. If you come on a tour, where would you go first? The snack shop, replied Jonathan confidently. Then that's where we will start, said Lucy. They headed outside and found a snack shop. Lucy walked up to the gentleman behind the counter. Excuse me, sir, but we are looking for a triangle-shaped stone that a boy lost over here when he visited yesterday. Have you seen it? I don't know where the stone is, said the man in the snack shop, but there was a boy here yesterday, and while he was buying a scone, I noticed a pink pigeon behind him. A pink pigeon! Exclaimed Sam. Yes, it was the strangest thing. I have never seen a pink pigeon before. I pointed it out to the boy, and he told me the pink pigeon had been following him ever since he got some stone, said the man. I still don't know what he meant. Sam pulled them aside. I know the pink pigeon, he exclaimed with excitement in his eyes. The bird is from the forest. She is only here to protect the stone. This means that we don't need to find the stone. We need to find the pink pigeon, and she will lead us to where the stone is. That will be a lot easier, replied Lucy. Finding that stone is like finding a needle in a haystack. I didn't see the pink pigeon in Westminster Abbey, which means she is in Buckingham Palace. We had better get there quickly, said Sam. Lucy and Sam turned around, and Jonathan was not with them. They saw him at the snack counter. Tell me more about these scones. Are they as delicious as they sound? Said Jonathan. Jonathan, we need to keep moving. We can get the scones later, replied Lucy. The three of them headed towards the exit. Lucy stopped by the ticket office for directions to Buckingham Palace. You had better ask the bobby standing there, replied the lady at the counter. I don't understand, said Lucy. What is a bobby? A bobby is what we call a policeman in England, she replied. Lucy got directions from the policeman, and they headed towards Buckingham Palace. Does the Queen live in Buckingham Palace? Asked Jonathan. Yes, replied Lucy, nodding her head. They reached the gates of the palace and saw a crowd outside. There were several guards in scarlet coats and tall bearskin caps marching in formation. There was even a band playing. What's going on? Lucy asked a girl who was standing and watching. It's the changing of the guard ceremony, she replied. It happens when the soldiers guarding Buckingham Palace finish their shift and new soldiers come in to take their place. We are never going to be able to go inside. Look at how many people are crowded outside and how many guards there are, said Jonathan. We don't have to, yelled Sam. I just saw the pink pigeon fly that way. The three of them ran around the palace towards the park. They caught sight of the pigeon again and ran after it. I look up to follow the pigeon to see where she is flying. You both look down to see if you can spot the stone, shouted Lucy. Suddenly, the pigeon landed. They knew the stone had to be somewhere close. They ran towards the pigeon, their eyes peeled. That's when they saw him, a little boy holding a triangle-shaped stone. There it is, yelled Jonathan. Lucy couldn't contain her excitement. Yay! We found the stone! Now the elf kingdom won't get cold, she said in relief. The three of them hugged each other. They were all so happy. But when they looked up, they saw the boy running out of the park with his family. They ran after him, but it was too late. The boy was running to board a red double-decker bus. As they looked on in dismay, the bus pulled away. What do we do now? Exclaimed Jonathan in horror. It's bus number 18. We need to figure out where that bus goes, replied Lucy. I don't see the pink pigeon anymore. She has probably gone back to the forest because she thinks we found the stone, said Sam. They saw another double-decker bus pull up and they jumped in. Can you please tell us where bus 18 is heading to? Asked Lucy. We are trying to find a boy but have no idea where he's going. Bus 18 goes to several places, but if it is a boy you are looking for, then chances are he's going to the London Zoo, replied the bus driver. This bus goes there as well. Hop on. I'll tell you when to get off. They boarded the bus and Lucy bought the tickets. They went to the top deck and sat right in front. From there, they could get a good view of the streets below them. London is such a beautiful city. We are so lucky we get to see it and also ride on the top of a double-decker bus, said Lucy. When they reached the London Zoo stop, they heard the announcement on the bus and scrambled off. They ran in, bought tickets, and started looking for the boy. They saw him almost immediately, outside the gorilla enclosure. He was leaning on the railing and looking at the gorillas and holding the magic stone. As they reached him, Lucy tapped him on the shoulder. He jerked around startled and in the process dropped the stone into the gorilla enclosure. Oh no! Exclaimed Sam. The boy looked confused when he saw them looking over the railing. It's just a stone, he said. I found it outside Buckingham Palace. They didn't reply. The three of them huddled together, trying to plan how they could get the stone back. It was going to be a challenge because they could not go into the gorilla enclosure. Just then, they saw a zoo worker below with a bucket to feed the gorillas. Please, sir, can you throw us the triangle-shaped stone that is down there? Asked Lucy. Don't let him throw the stone. If it falls on the ground and breaks, then it loses its magic, shouted Sam. But it was too late. The zoo worker had already thrown the stone up to them. They watched, as if in slow motion, as the stone sailed over their heads. There is no way we can catch it, thought Lucy. It's all over. Then, to her surprise, she saw Jonathan run and leap into the air and as if by magic, caught the stone with one hand before landing on the ground. Lucy and Sam ran up to him. "That was amazing," said Sam. "You are my hero," said Lucy. "I think I saw a shop that sells scones over there," said Jonathan. They gathered around and Sam clutched the magic stone. "Thank you both so much. You saved the elf kingdom," he said. With those words and a quick hug, he hurried away, heading back to the forest before it got too cold. "Let's get that scone. You deserve it," said Lucy. They enjoyed their treat as they wandered around the zoo looking at the animals. "I'm so glad we were able to help Sam," said Lucy. "We are getting quite good at this," replied Jonathan. "Now, let's go home." They huddled together while Lucy pulled out the golden egg from her backpack. They closed their eyes. She twisted the top of the egg, and when they opened their eyes, they were back at home. The end. Here are some fun facts about England. These fun facts can be found below the written version of the story as well. Did you know the United Kingdom is made up of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland? London is in England and is the capital of the United Kingdom. Did you know the flag of the United Kingdom is called the Union Jack? It comprises of England's Cross of St. George, which is the red plus in the middle, Scotland's Cross of St. Andrew, the white X with the blue background, and Ireland's Cross of St. Patrick, the red X. Did you know that there are 4 clock faces on the Elizabeth Tower? Each has a pendulum that swings back and forth to control the movement of the clock's hands. If the clock runs too fast, an English penny is added to the pendulum to slow it down. If the clock runs too slow, a penny is removed. The London Zoo is the oldest zoo in the world. It was founded in 1826. The Winnie the Pooh stories were based on an actual black bear who lived in the London Zoo. The picture is of the bear. Did you know that although London is one of the world's largest cities, it has enough trees and green spaces to meet the technical definition of a forest? Did you know the London subway is called the Underground and nicknamed the Tube? It is the first and oldest underground train network in the world. And finally, did you know that in 1968, the London Bridge that spans the River Thames was dismantled and sold to a business person in the United States? A new bridge was constructed in London to take its place. The old London Bridge still stands in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. This picture is from 1870 when the bridge was still in London. That's it for the story and fun facts. See you all next week.